Hey everybody, today we're going to be showing you how to decorate a birthday cake. Happy birthday! Now it's time to decorate your cake. Nobody else is going to do it for you because nobody is coming over to celebrate your birthday with you. They wouldn't dare. They don't want to be around you, and even if they did, they wouldn't risk it. What if everybody in class found out that they were hanging out with you? They'd be a laughingstock. They'd be chastised and brutalized and shunned. You understand how that feels. You wouldn't want anybody else to feel so alone and isolated and hated as you do, so you don't even bother inviting people over for your birthday anymore. In fact, you don't even really celebrate. You just make yourself a subpar cake and decorate it yourself, alone, in the dark, alone, completely alone. To decorate a birthday cake, spread some goo on it and make it into a design. Who cares? Why do I even bother doing this every year? I don't even like cake. I used to think it would cheer me up, but it doesn't. Nothing does. I hate this. I hate birthdays. I hate myself. I hate calendars. Hey everybody, today we're going to be showing you how to deal with being alone. I've spent a great deal of time alone, believe you me. I can't tell you how many hours, days, weeks, months, years, leap years, and so on that I've spent alone. Most of the time I really enjoy it, but sometimes it's tough. When I am alone, I feel like I can be who I truly am. A very weird and wet person. I can express myself to myself and know that I'm being honest and true to the real me. I can also rip incredibly loud, long farts and not need to blame it on somebody else. It's the kind of genuine authenticity that I have trouble finding when I'm in the company of others. I enjoy the silence. I enjoy the solitude. I enjoy the absence of other people's gross odors and wet chewing sounds. I thrive when I'm alone, but it wasn't always this way. No, I used to have a very tough time spending so much time alone, and if I'm being totally honest, sometimes it's still difficult. Each day presents a new never-ending list of obstacles. Life is full of challenges. No matter who you are or what you're doing, you will suffer. I promise you that. But that's no reason to worry. I believe that coming to an understanding with life, meeting life halfway, and really trying to appreciate what life is, an endless series of struggles, failures, problems, and hardships, is what can make life more tolerable. At least for me. You see, spending so much time alone was a lot harder before I came to realize that when I'm alone, I can think about whatever I want, unbothered. I can try and understand things around me. I'm not just talking about dirt and leaves and rocks and sludge. I'm talking about things that I can't see, like love and life and the sound a bird makes when it's laying an egg. Why do some birds scream when they push the eggs out of themselves and other birds just sit there in silence, smiling at you, mocking you, daring you to eat its egg? It's almost like the bird wants me to devour its unborn offspring. I don't get it. I think that is something that humanity will never fully understand. Birds, I mean. Anyway, when you spend time alone, you can contemplate uninterrupted, unhindered. You can spend as much or as little time trying to figure it all out as you want. And trust me, there are plenty of things to try and figure out. You'll never run out of things. Just think about all the different tutorials I've made over the years. That's not even 1% of all the things. You could spend a lifetime thinking about just one thing if you wanted. It's up to you. Sure, sometimes your mind will wander to things that you don't want to think about. I'm afraid I can't help you with that. You either let it wander to those bad things or you force it back to the good things. That's not something I can assist with. Unfortunately, I don't have the power to control your mind yet, but I'm working on it. That's something I think about sometimes when I'm alone, how to control other people's minds. I haven't got it totally figured out just yet, but I'm getting there. So what I'm really trying to say is that being alone can be tough, but being alone is also the only time you get to be 100% who you are. It's the only time you can think about whatever you want to think. It's the only time you can bathe in a mist of your own gnarly farts without fear. Try to keep these things in mind, and maybe being alone won't be so tough all the time. Hey everybody, today we're going to be showing you how to catch a snowflake. I live in a place where it's not snowing today, so I can't catch any snowflakes on my wet little tongue, and that makes me sad. It makes me upset. It makes me thirsty and hungry. I'm a thirsty boy, and I yearn for the refreshing taste of a pristine snowflake. Oh, how I wish I could be in a small wooded area surrounded by nothing but bare frozen trees and beautifully fresh snow. It's always so quiet when it snows like this. Listen. I can't hear a thing. It's perfect.
I love not hearing things. The earth is far too loud most of the time, if you ask me. There's the sound of traffic, or of animals yelping, or of machinery grinding, or people belching and farting and pooping out of their fourth-floor windows right into the street. I don't know if it's like this where you live, but there's a part of the town here where people have gotten into the habit of hanging their rumps out of their windows and pooping onto the pavement below. I guess it initially started as an attempt to save water by not having to flush. I get it. I try to save resources when I can. We must care for the earth even though it's a terribly brutal place that cares not for us. We must do what we can to stop the suffering we have caused the planet. I understand that, so at first I applauded the people who had the courage and courtesy to poop out of their windows into the streets rather than waste a flush of water in their toilet. When it first started, there were stories about it on the news. It was seen as a local curiosity, a fad that surely wouldn't last long, but they were wrong. It started 6 years ago and there are still turds falling from the windows of tall buildings all throughout town. The municipality even instituted a waterless cleaning crew that came through a few times each day and swept up the sloppy mess. It's a difficult, thankless job. I know. I was part of that task force for nearly a year before I got fired for not disposing of the collected waste properly. You see, I have a large garden. Well, it's not really a garden. It's the corner of an unused field that I've commandeered and used to plant vegetable seeds that I've pulled out of garbage cans. You'd be shocked if you knew how many tomato slices and pieces of cucumber and zucchini and eggplant end up in the dumpsters behind restaurants. All you have to do is dig around in the muck for a little while and you're sure to find a veritable bevy of usable seeds. Anyway, I collect garbage seeds and sow them in my corner of this neglected field and grow most of the food I eat. I'm not a millionaire. I can't afford to go to the local grocer to purchase my ingredients all the time. I also can't afford the expensive mulches and fertilizers that are required to grow these plants. Sometimes I have to get creative when it comes to caring for my crops, and this is what led to me being fired by the turd sweeping task force. As I said, fertilizer is expensive. I can't afford to buy the name brand stuff. I can't even afford the generic bags most of the time. So I thought, why not just use some of the bags of poop that I haul around all day at work? Surely nobody will miss a bag or two of the stinky brown. Surely I wouldn't be hurting anybody if I secreted away a few pounds of the stuff to feed my hungry plants. Alas, I was wrong. I was quickly caught when a bag of liquid diarrhea that I had hidden under my shirt sprung a leak and saturated my clothing in front of my coworkers. They were quick to report me to the foreman, who berated me and fired me on the spot. That was a difficult time in my life, but my life has consisted of only difficult times, so it stands out no more than any other unfortunate episode. I wish I could catch a snowflake on my tongue right now in these quiet, beautiful woods. Hey everybody, today we're going to be showing you how to take off. Sometimes I want to get away from where I am, and I don't mean by walking or taking the bus. Sometimes I want to get really far away. I want to go where nobody knows me, nobody recognizes me. I can't walk that far, so what I do in these situations is go to my local airport, and I see if there are any pilots who might be willing to fly me with them. I'm not talking about going to a big airport where there are tons of people getting on huge airplanes to go on trips and stuff. That won't work. You've got to pay for those big wig flights, and I'm not a millionaire. Luckily, there's a small airport in the town next to where I live, so sometimes I'll go there in the mornings and wait outside of the little restaurant they have there, and I'll ask people as they're leaving if they're pilots. If they say yes, I ask them if they're flying anywhere today. If they say yes, I ask if I can go with them. Most of them say no. Some of them get mad, some call the police, but every so often one of the pilots will have a kind heart, and they'll see the suffering in mine eyes, and they'll say,
"Sure thing, little buddy. I'll fly you out of here. I'll fly you far away so nobody can hurt you."
And I thank them and I kiss their hand and I smile. I don't have a pilot's license myself, but I've been doing this for several years now, and I've spent quite a bit of time inside these small planes, so I've learned a thing or two about flying, and taking off is definitely one of the most important parts. I used to be scared of it. I used to have to close my eyes, but not anymore. I conquered my fear of taking off when I realized that taking off meant that I was getting away from where I was. I was leaving. I was going far away. That wouldn't be possible without taking off, and once I understood that and appreciated it, I began to love it. Now, whenever I take off in one of these little planes, I get so excited that I start giggling and shaking. Sometimes the pilots notice and ask if I'm alright, but I just explain that I'm excited, and then they usually leave me alone. It's really exhilarating, the feeling of being in this tiny, poorly constructed vehicle that's traveling across the ground so quickly that it begins to levitate. It's amazing. Nobody can run as fast as I'm moving moving when I'm taking off. Nobody can catch me. Nobody can stop me. I'm flying. I'm getting out of here. I'm flying. It's beautiful. I shouldn't have drank so much hot chocolate before we left because I really have to pee and poop, but it's beautiful and I'm crying and I'm happy and my stomach hurts and it's just so beautiful. Hey everybody, today we're going to be showing you how to volunteer at the library. I volunteered at the library for a while. That was great. It would have been cooler if I'd gotten paid for my labor, but beggars can't be choosers, and I was just happy to get out of the rain for a while. They put me in the back of the library so I wouldn't scare the kids, and they had me put books on this incredible machine that moved them away from me. It was awesome. I wish I had a machine like that of my own. I wish I could get on a thing and then have it move me. They should make a bigger version of this sort of thing so that we can use it ourselves. Cars are dumb and expensive and motorcycles are cool, but I'm not allowed to have one anymore. So my only option is to skateboard or walk everywhere. And since no skateboard companies have responded to my sponsor me tape, I've been walking. That wouldn't be an issue if the earth was covered in this awesome moving machine though. Nobody would need to worry about anything. You could go anywhere for free. You wouldn't need a car or an airplane. You could just stand there and be moved. Speaking of being moved, I was recently moved to tears. I cry a lot, don't get me wrong, but I usually cry because I'm extremely sad and or angry. This time though, I was moved to tears because I saw something beautiful. I don't want to tell you what I saw because there's no way I could possibly portray the immeasurable beauty and magnificence in words, but let's just say that it had to do with the grilled cheese sandwich. You can probably figure out the rest for yourself, and if you can't, I'll give you one more hint. I ate a grilled cheese sandwich the other day, and when I used the bathroom to poop it out, I looked in the toilet bowl to find a grilled cheese sandwich in pristine condition. I couldn't understand it at first, but I talked to a person who said that they were a doctor, and they said that this happens from time to time. It's pretty rare. About 1 in a million people get to experience this in their life, but apparently what happened is that I ate the grilled cheese sandwich and my body digested it like normal, but when I got to the end of my gut tubes, it was miraculously pressed back into its original shape by my colon. It was incredible. It really did look perfect. It looked good enough to eat, and it was. I ate it. Hey everybody, today we're going to be showing you how to watch a sunset. You can't just watch the sunset from any old where. You've got to get a good vantage point. You've got to be able to see the horizon where the sun is setting. It can't be obscured by trees or buildings or people with tall hats who are rudely standing in front of you. This means that you must sometimes run frantically in order to find a place where you can watch the sunset. You see, the sun only sets once each day and only for a few minutes at a time. It's sort of a rare occurrence. If you think about it, how many sunsets have you actually watched in your life? Maybe 20, maybe less. Now think about how many days you've been alive. The sun is set for each and every one of those days, and you've only seen a small handful of them. That's pretty rare if you ask me. Sunsets are arguably one of the most beautiful things in the world, yet you've only watched a few of them. What does that tell you about yourself? What does that tell you about the world? Does it mean that you don't value beauty? Does it mean that the world is set up in such a way as to not allow you to appreciate the grandeur of nature? Does it mean that life is so full of so many obstacles, both big and small, that watching a sunset is sometimes impossibly difficult, even though it happens in the same place every day at a knowable time? I'm afraid I haven't got the answers to those questions. That's something you're going to have to work out for yourself. What I do know is that I'm going to take the initiative to watch this sunset. This big burning orb is sinking fast, so I've got to find a good spot to see it and appreciate its unique, tireless splendor. Frankly, I don't know if I'll be able to find a good spot to see it, but I'm gonna try. I'm not just gonna stop and say that it's too hard and give up. I'm not gonna let anything distract me. I'm gonna run around in the fading light until I find a place where I can watch the sunset, even if it's just a little bit of the sunset. I don't need to see the entire skyline. I'm not greedy. I just want a little slice of the sunset that I can call my own. Is that too much to ask? A little bit of beauty for me to enjoy for a few minutes? Then I'll go back to the unending march toward the gaping void. Then I'll go back to the nearly unendurable, monotonous life we all must live. But please, just for a minute or two, let me enjoy the sunset, please. Hey everybody, today we're going to be showing you how to fly a kite. I love flying kites. I wish I could afford a store-bought one. They're so bright and colorful, they're beautiful. The kite I have is one that I made out of newspaper and twigs and bees spit. I bet you didn't know that you could use bees spit as glue, did you? Did you? I knew it. You don't know anything. My favorite part about flying a kite is the flying part. I love watching my disgusting creation soar through the clouds and almost hit birds. I'm getting better at aiming my kite, and someday I hope I'll get good enough to aim it and hit a bird and get to have free bird dinners after a long day of kite flying. I'd love to make eagle soup just once, just one taste. That would be enough for mine lips. I want to sup upon the savory wing meat of such a humble, bald creature. I wish there were more bald animals. I can only think of 3: eagles, walruses, and people. People like to act like they aren't animals, but they are. I have seen people do things that are truly animalistic. I myself have committed some rather beastly acts in the past, but I like to leave the past where it belongs, in the past, and only focus on the future. Hopefully, technology and science will get advanced enough in the future so that I will be able to buy a backpack or something that turns me into a kite. I mean, I want to be able to wear a thing that will let me fly in the breezes and catch birds with my 2 greasy hands and even eat them while I'm flying around if I'm hungry enough. Why should I have to come back down to the filthy earth to eat my birds? This is my future I'm wishing for. I can hope for whatever I want. If science doesn't have the guts to make me a kite-style backpack, then I hope reincarnation exists so that when I pass on to the next life, I'll come back as a kite. Then I'll be able to fly around above all you idiots on Earth. I'll be able to taste the clouds and touch the sun. I'll be able to look down people's chimneys as I'm flying overhead, and if I'm lucky enough, maybe I'll see something cool. I'm not saying I want to spy on naked ladies who are hanging out in the fireplace. That's gross. I mean, maybe I'll get to see somebody get a new high score on their favorite video game, Pig Warrior. Pig Warrior is a game that features neither pig nor warrior. It has that name because the lady who invented it was bet $80 that they couldn't make a video game with the coolest name in the world. But obviously, she won that bet. I'd love to play Pig Warrior almost as much as I'd love to be a kite. I don't really know the rules of reincarnation. Maybe you can come back as a video game. Maybe you can come back as anything. Maybe you can't come back at all. Like I said, I don't know the rules. You know what else? I don't play by the rules. I'm a punk. I'm a rebel. I'm awesome and strong and thick and muscular and covered in veins, and I'll do whatever I want and nobody can stop me. I'm the ruler of my domain, and my domain is the entire world, so you better watch out. Don't mess with me. Don't put your soda down the back of my shirt anymore, okay? Don't put the soda in the microwave for a really long time so it reduces down into a thick sludge, and then pour it down the back of my shirt during the school assembly. Everybody laughed and called me SodaStream, and then when I told them that I would sue them for calling me the name of a trademarked product, they just laughed some more. School can be really difficult sometimes. It can be hard, but I'm not saying that you should drop out or anything. And education is important, but I guess you can just learn stuff outside of school. I mean, look at me. I'm here teaching you about all sorts of stuff each week, and I'm not a real teacher. I am but a humble being trying to share my knowledge with those who need it most. I'm just trying to turn my years of suffering and experience and failures into something positive. Maybe you can learn from my mistakes. Maybe watching these little tutorials of mine will act as a cautionary tale, and it will save you from following in my footsteps toward pure calamity and self-destruction. Well, you know what they say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them think. They're right about that. Whoever invented that saying was right. Horses are extremely stupid and they have never thought about anything. That's terrifying now that I'm thinking about it. Horses have never had a single thought, but they still have the bloodlust within them, and they will bite you in half if you get too close. So please, stay away from horses. Stay in school. Get the high score playing Pig Warrior. Who knows, maybe if you're lucky, a kite that is actually a reincarnated man will be flying over your house while you beat the final boss on the last level of Pig Warrior, and they'll look down your chimney right as you win and they'll think, you're pretty cool. Wouldn't that be nice? I think so.
Hey everybody, today we're going to be showing you how to roll dough. Rolling dough is a great activity. It's easy and fun and meditative. It's also a necessary step in loaf making. I love a good loaf, and that's the truth. God's honest truth if you think about it. To roll dough, you'll just need to get yourself some dough that hasn't been rolled. Been rolling. I don't know how to say it, but just get a big goop of dough that isn't flat. Once you've got that, you can get down to business. My favorite part of rolling dough is the repetitive nature. You see, dough is full of anger and strength, much like you and I, and it doesn't want to get rolled out without a fight, and it will fight, and it's your job to conquer the dough and show it who's boss. This means that you'll have to roll it over and over again. It's such an easy thing to do that I don't even need to think about it when I'm doing it. I can easily let my mind drift while I'm rolling dough. I can think about whatever I want.
I can think about the time I went to the doctor because I had a weird bump on my neck. The doctor was really nice about it. After he stopped laughing at me, he wiped the tears of joy from his eyes and he apologized. I can't ever remember somebody apologizing to me for laughing at me other than the doctor. I wish I still remembered his name, but alas, I have a broken memory and a bad brain. The lump on my neck was a symptom of my bad brain, I guess. At least that's what the doctor said, and I for one believe him because he was the nicest doctor I ever did meet. Nice people don't lie or trick you. Well, the nice doctor was nice enough to remove my throat neck lump with his doctor's blade, and he put a band-aid on me and sent me on my way. He called the lump something, a warp or a snort or something. I don't remember what he said. I wasn't listening super well, but something I can remember is the doctor saying that the reason I had the lump was because I have a bad brain and don't think or read enough. He said the only cure for neck lumps like mine was to try to be smart. I told the doctor that I'd been trying to be smart for years, but it never worked because I was always confused and felt like I had a mouthful of mush when I tried to talk to people, so I gave up. If there's one thing I've learned in life, it's to not put too much effort into anything. Give up if something is too hard. Just do easy stuff if you can. If something's too difficult, trick somebody else into doing it, or find something else, or just do nothing. That's probably my favorite hobby and pastime, doing nothing. I can spend days at a time doing nothing. I love it. I love the stillness, the silence, the lack of sensory interaction. I try to do nothing for at least 2 hours every day. My head and my eyes start to hurt if I go too long without doing nothing. I hope when I die I get to spend eternity doing nothing. I once listened to a lady read the Bible for 2 weeks straight. She never slept or got up from her chair or ate or anything. Once a day a boy would come by and wipe her sweaty feet and brow with a rag and try and splash some water into her mouth, but it was tough because she wouldn't look up from the page. She wouldn't stop reading, not for 1 second, until she finished the whole Bible. Anyway, I remember there being some parts in there where she spoke of heaven and what it's like there. I guess it sounded pretty nice at the time, but if I could make my own heaven, I would make it be a place that's completely dark and there's nobody there except for me, and I don't have to run or eat or poop or swim across anything. I could just do nothing all the time forever. Just thinking about it's getting me excited. I think heaven should be different for each person. I feel like if heaven is really the perfect place, then there's no way for it to be just one big area where all the good people go when they die, because people don't all like the same stuff. Take me, for example. I hate most things. Even things that people think are good and fun. They usually make me sick and angry and violent. There are probably other people like me too. You know, people who don't like stuff. How are those people going to feel when they get to heaven and it sucks? What a letdown. I'd be so angry if I spent my entire life trying to be good only to get to heaven and have it just be a little bit better than normal life. I'd revolt. I'd burn the place to the ground. Maybe people who don't like stuff don't go to heaven. Maybe heaven is just for those who all like the same things, and those things are in heaven, and that's the only criteria for getting in. I mean, maybe heaven is just filled with roller skating and milkshakes, and all you need to do to get into heaven is to like milkshakes and roller skating. Then you die and you go there. It doesn't matter if you're good or not. You just have to enjoy the amenities that are provided for the inhabitants of heaven. That's how they make sure that everybody in there is happy. They only admit people who they know will be satisfied with roller skating and milkshakes. Everybody else goes somewhere else. I've never heard of there being multiple heavens, so I assume that all the people who don't like roller skates and milkshakes go to the bad place. You know where I mean. I don't want to say it because I don't like cusses, but you know exactly where I mean. It's the place where the devil lives. That's where all of us are going to end up after we die. That's why I don't try to do good anymore. I gave up on that a long time ago. Not worth it. Not worth my time and effort. Even if I keep trying to be good all the time, my brain is so bad that I mess up and hurt people and hurt myself and make myself sad and angry. So who cares? I'm going to do whatever I want and not worry about going to heaven. I'm going to spend my days doing nothing and just hope for the best.
Hey everybody, today we're going to be showing you how to kiss. Kissing can be great or it can be bad. It really just depends on who you're kissing and how you're kissing and how you feel about them and how they feel about you. Kissing is all about feeling, really, and I'm not just talking about physical feelings. Sure, it can feel really nice to rub your dry lips and wet tongue all over somebody else's greasy mouth. It can feel exciting and strange and so wet. But even more important than the physical feelings involved with kissing are the emotional feelings. I'm talking about love and friendship and intimacy and terror and confusion and anguish and longing and a pain so great that you think you might die, but you don't die. You just lie awake at night thinking about the moment the two of you shared, that moment that felt so huge and so insignificant all at once. You've never experienced anything like it. How can something be so great and so small, so lingering and so fleeting? It doesn't make sense, but that doesn't stop you from trying to make sense of it, and that's why you're here in your bed, and it's nearly 4 in the morning and you haven't slept at all. You've been trying to make sense of it for hours, and you're not making any progress. You didn't make any progress last night when you were thinking about it, and it's unlikely that you'll make any progress when you're thinking about it tomorrow night, even though you're planning on taking those pills that you bought at the gas station that are supposed to improve your stamina and focus and girth. Hopefully it'll increase your brain girth so you can figure it all out. You'd like to get to sleep, your body is tired, but you can't stop thinking about that kiss. You have an unending list of questions, but very, very few answers, because the person you kissed, the person who kissed you, they're gone, and you can't talk to them, and they won't talk to you. You can't talk to anybody else about it, and there's no way they'd understand, so you talk to yourself about it. But you only have the answers that you already have, and you've got so many questions without answers. So what do? You lie in bed, and you replay the kiss over and over in your head. You try to focus in on every detail. You try and savor the sweetness of it, but you realize with each repetition of the events in your mind that it's getting a little fuzzier. It's breaking down a bit more every time you think about it. Memories aren't like a photograph. When you look at a picture, you're looking at a single moment. It'll always look the same no matter how many times you look at it. Yeah, you might notice something that you hadn't noticed before in the picture, but it was always there. It's always the same. Memories are like photocopies of something. The original is the event itself, the kiss. When you think back and remember the kiss, you're looking at a copy of it. Each time you remember it, you're making a copy of the most recent copy. The more copies you make of this memory and this kiss, the more distorted and blurry it becomes. The fine lines start to disappear, the details become washed out, and the text illegible. Realizing this as you lie awake in your bed, alone, confused, pining for what you cannot have, you understand that if you want to preserve the memory of your kiss, you have to stop thinking about it lest you grind it into an indecipherable powder. So you tell yourself to stop thinking about the kiss. You tell yourself to stop asking yourself questions about what it meant and how they might have felt about it and if they are thinking about you. You try and control yourself and get some sleep, but you just keep replaying the kiss, that incredible kiss, over and over, even though you know that the memory diminishes with each repetition. You can't help it. You can't control yourself. You've got a nasty case of the hiccups as well. Are the hiccups related to the memory thing, to the kiss? Who knows? Terrified that you are slowly destroying the most important memory you have, you decide to go through the memory and focus on every little detail and save those details as their own separate memories. So even if you eventually wear the memory of the kiss into oblivion, you'll still have the little fragments that you can cherish even after the kiss is no longer recognizable. You replay the scene and you first focus on the smells, the warm summer evening air, the dying light after the sunset, the feel of their skin on yours, the sounds of the leaves moving as if they were liquid in the air, the crackle of the campfire, the gentle purr of the waves as they lapped upon the lake shore, the heat of your breath and theirs as you inhaled and exhaled into one another, filling each other's lungs like party balloons. You think of the look on their face, their eyes slowly closing, their eyes opening again afterwards, the slight smile on their lips, the pounding of your heart. You think about how they looked later that night when they got out of the car and walked to their door. You think about how long it took you to clean out the car. You didn't want to say anything, and neither did they because it's pretty embarrassing, but apparently they really had to pee or something, but they didn't want to mention it and spoil the mood, so they held it as long as they could as you two drove home. You noticed that they really started squirming a whole lot in their seat, and you saw that they were crying. You tried to act like you didn't notice it, but they kept wiping their eyes, and you couldn't figure out why. But now you know why. It's because they peed their pants, and it's all over the place. How in the world could one person hold this much liquid within themselves? So after you dropped them off, you had to go to the car wash and use the wet vacuum to try to get the urine out of the passenger seat. It was probably close to 3 liters of fluid, an unbelievable amount. You had to clean it up before going back home because it smelled really strong, and you knew that if you left it, the car would permanently stink like that, and you like the way your car normally smells. So you spent 45 minutes vacuuming up cold pee from the seat and Jesus, it's soaked all the way through the seat, so you had to push the seat all the way back to be able to fit the vacuum hose under it and get it out of the carpet. The car wash charged 25 cents a minute for the wet vacuum thing, which is a ton of money if you're going to use it for that long. You had to keep going in and asking the guy to exchange your dollars for quarters, and by the end of it, he was obviously really annoyed. And so were you, because it's his job to do that. You're a paying customer, so you should be able to do it without him rolling his eyes and stuff. You made a mental note never to go back there and see that guy again. He's just an angry individual who doesn't like his position in life. But now that you're thinking about it, here in your bed, awake long after you should have been asleep, are you and the guy at that car wash really so different? You're both upset, you're both confused, you're both just trying to find answers in a cold world full of questions and doubt and disappointment. Maybe you and that guy have more in common than you originally thought. Maybe that guy isn't so bad after all.
Hey everybody, today we're going to be showing you how to drive at night. Driving at night can be scary. For the most part, the nighttime is a lot darker than the daytime. That's just how it is. You might think that it would be better if it was just daytime all the time, but let me ask you this. How would you know when to go to sleep if it never got dark? How would you be able to do your most shameful outdoor activities if it were always bright and sunny? It's okay if you don't want to answer those questions. I understand. You don't have to answer every single question you get asked. That's something I'm really thankful for. If I had to answer every question that somebody asked me, I'd be in a lot of trouble. Luckily, I'm really good at keeping my mouth shut. You might not think that, but that's just because you only ever hear me talking. When I'm not making these tutorials, I'm generally silent. I sometimes don't say anything for days at a time. Those are the good days, if you ask me. In a perfect world, I would only have to speak to someone if I wanted to. I wouldn't be forced by social requirements to speak to people I don't want to speak to. Imagine that. Imagine how much better the world would be if people only had to talk when they wanted to. In fact, since I'm fantasizing about how great it would be, why not take it a step further? Imagine how great it would be to not only not have to talk to anybody if you didn't want to, but not have anybody talk to you unless you wanted them to. Let's take it one more step toward perfection. Imagine you didn't have to hear other people talking to each other unless you wanted to. Imagine you didn't have to see people unless you really wanted to. Imagine you lived in a world of complete and perfect solitude for as long as you wanted, whenever you wanted. I can't think of anything better than that. If I could have any superpower, I'd have the ability to be completely left alone whenever I felt like it. I'd give anything for that. There's nothing better than feeling and being completely alone when you want to be. Not another soul around for miles. You can't hear idiots talking. You can't hear their stupid cars driving. You can't hear your neighbors screaming again, screaming at each other, keeping you up all night with their incessant fighting. What are they fighting about this time? You're wide awake now, so you might as well listen in and try to figure out what's going on. You hold your breath, and if you focus hard enough, their voices through the walls become clear and you can make out what they're saying. And wouldn't you know it, they're fighting about the same thing they always fight about. Who clogged the toilet? You never understand why they get in such heated arguments about it. Why doesn't the guilty party just fess up and accept the responsibility for clogging the toilet with their thick, hairy turds? That's nothing to be ashamed of. Just say it was you and then take a potato masher in there and mash it up into manageable bits so the plumbing can handle it. It just doesn't make sense. Your neighbors fight and argue and scream and insult each other over a clogged toilet at least once a week, yet they've been together for years, and whenever you see them, they seem so happy. They're always kissing and smooching and laughing and tickling each other. You can't figure it out. How can they be so affectionate and loving during the day and turn into such vicious monsters at night when one of them blocks up the toilet tubes with their industrial-grade logs? Relationships are so confusing. You can't deal with their screaming, not tonight, so you get dressed and you leave. You get in your car and you just drive. You don't know where you're going, but it doesn't matter. It's just good to get away from people for a little while. It's good not to have to hear your neighbors fighting over whose butthole pushed a rope of poop so muscular into the toilet that it's now rendered useless. Hey everybody, today we're going to be showing you how to live in a tiny house. Tiny houses are like normal houses, but they're tinier. It's pretty easy to understand why they're called that if you think about it. It's also pretty easy to see their appeal. They're cute, comfortable, nice looking. They have walls and ceilings. They sometimes have nice little fireplaces and little chimneys so the smoke goes out and the house doesn't choke you to death in your sleep. That's how 2 of my grandfathers died, sleep smoke. My first grandpapa died in his cabin when he was just 16, 2 years after he sired my father. He had set a big fire in the fireplace because it was the beginning of February and the winters can get mighty cold around here. He lived alone at the time. The cabin was barely big enough for him. If you think these tiny homes are tiny, you should have seen my grandpapa's cabin. It's gone now though, so you can't see it, so please don't ask. Anyway, Grandpapa built up a hefty fire to ensure that he didn't freeze to death during the nightly snowstorm. It was something he had done 1,000 times before, maybe 1,000,000 times. An amateur firemaker he was not. He had learned the craft of building a safe, long-lasting fire when he was a boy, which he was at that time because, like I said, he was 16. He only had 2 children. How old could he have been? It wasn't his fault that he died from smoke poisoning in his sleep that night. No, sir. He was a professional. It was the fault of a greasy night weasel. That's what we call raccoons around here. Night weasels. The way I've always heard the story told is that Grandpapa built up a big fire in his little shack, finished his plate of beans, said his prayers, and then curled up and went to sleep. It couldn't have been long after he dozed off that the night weasel came a-wandering in from the cold and sought refuge in Grandpapa's handcrafted fireplace flue. It got itself all wedged up in there to try to escape the bitter cold and couldn't wriggle loose, so it died from smoke poisoning, and then its carcass, having blocked the one exit for the smoke from the fireplace, started pouring into Grandpapa's shed house, and being the heavy sleeper he was, he did not wake up until he was dead. They found him in spring after the thaw, and they said he was as dry and smoked as a sheet of beef jerky. I've never had beef jerky myself. I've never been able to afford beef, but I've had a plethora of other smoked, dried, and cured meats in my day, and if my old granddad looked anything like the armadillo jerky I've made, well, then it must have been a sorry sight indeed. Now my other grandpapa, Grandfather Newhouse, he also succumbed to smoke poisoning, but his is a much different story that I don't have the stomach to retell just yet, as I recently finished a meal of eggs, and they're not sitting quite right in my old gut box, and the details of Grandfather Newhouse's demise are so graphic and gruesome that I worry speaking them aloud could cause me to have a case of the vomits. I hope you'll forgive me. Anyway, tiny houses are great, I bet. I don't have one myself, but I can certainly imagine just how nice it must be to live in one of them. Boy, oh boy. A couch, a bed, a shower, a sink, a flush toilet. I can only imagine. It'd be like winning the lottery. It'd be like finding a goose that lays golden eggs, or just a goose that lays normal eggs. I know I said I just finished a meal of eggs, so it doesn't stand to reason that I'd be salivating over the idea of a whole big bushel of them, but the ones I just ate were not high quality. I can tell you that much. They weren't even birds' eggs. Now, I've only eaten a goose's egg once in my life, and it was a meal I shall not soon forget. The firm, fragrant white, the creamy, viscous yolk, the bitter yet wholesome shell. The yolk was the best part. I've never had another yolk like it. It was so much darker than normal egg yolks, almost brown, and the texture, oh, the texture was divine. It was liquid, but somehow also sort of stringy. It kind of reminded me of pictures I've seen of cheese pizza where somebody's lifting up a slice and the melted cheese is all goopy and stringy. It strings all over the place. That's what that goose yolk was like. Liquid, but you also had to chew it. So good. But I guess getting to live inside a tiny house like this would be even better than getting to have my own goose who'd feed me its eggs each day. Since I'm daydreaming and fantasizing, why not just imagine having both? Maybe that's a bit too much to ask for. An unleaking roof over my head and a belly full of a goose's eggs. I'd really be happy with either of them. I'd probably be happier with the tiny house if I had to pick between the two. I'd hate to have to choose, though. I mean, if I were in a situation where somebody was offering me an egg-producing goose or a tiny house, that'd be a tough time. I'm pretty sure I'd pick the house, but I'd hate to have to say it in front of the goose. You can break a goose's heart by doing something like that. I've seen it done. The goose wasn't ever the same after it had its heart all busted up. But that's a story for another time. I think I'd be so happy if I got to live in a tiny house like this, and I'd love to live in there with my partner if I had one. Maybe we'd have a family, just 6 or 7 kids, and a mess of hogs in the backyard to give the kids something to do and to provide us with meat and milk. That would sure be something. Even the bad times wouldn't be so bad if I weren't alone. If I had a family, I mean. I know that there'd be arguments and disagreements and near constant screaming and worry that my partner would be cheating on me with somebody better looking and smarter and thicker and uncut. But I think I could deal with all that. And the nice moments would help wash away the bad moments, I think. Sitting in the hog pen and watching the sunset surrounded by my little ones. 6 boys and 1 girl if I had it my way. My daughter would be the oldest by 12 years. We'd plan it that way so we could learn how to raise a child with her. Test out the parenting techniques and figuring out how often you've got to feed a child, that kind of stuff. Then, once we had it all figured out and she was 11, we'd start pumping out babies until we had 6 more. My daughter, whose name would absolutely be Granoliana, would act as a mother to the 6 younger children. I'm sure by that point I'd be sick of raising kids, so it'd be her job to do it. She'd teach them and feed them and wipe them and comb them and whatever else kids need having done to their bodies to make sure that they keep working. What a life that would be. All of us huddled up around the clock radio in our tiny house, listening to the crackling, distorted radio announcements about the weather and car dealerships and national tragedies. I can't wait. I simply cannot wait, but I suppose I'll have to. I'm a long way off from attaining any of those daydreams, having kids, having a loving partner, having a house, having a pig pen. Sometimes that stuff seems so far away that I'll never get there. I get so sad sometimes thinking about all the things I want and don't have. I don't know if I'll ever have them. I know I want them, but I don't know if I'll ever get them. People act like all you have to do is want something bad enough and you'll get it. Well, I can tell you from a lifetime of experience that that is not how it works. I've wanted so many things, basic things, normal things. No matter how hard I work and how badly I strive, I don't get them. I don't understand why people act like wanting something and working toward a goal is enough. It isn't enough. It's not even close. You need luck. I might say that you need luck more than any other part of the equation. And luck is something I certainly do not have. Luck has been in short supply all my life. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to make you pity me. I don't want people feeling sorry for me. I haven't got anybody to blame other than myself for my shortcomings. Let's get back to the topic at hand, living in a tiny house. I don't imagine that it would be much different from living in a big house or even a medium house. They all have the same stuff nowadays, windows and floors and handles, boxes, contraptions. I can't believe how much technology has advanced in the past few years. When I was a kid, our home didn't have fancy compartments and televisions. We didn't even have a real door. We just had a bunch of sticks and logs that we'd stack in front of the opening. Nowadays, there's so many gadgets and conveniences. Don't get me wrong, I'm thankful for the many advancements that science has made to help make our lives easier. It's just that sometimes I wonder if life really is easier now than it was before we had all these fancy doodads everywhere. I'm glad that there are medicines that can help sick people get better faster than ever before, but maybe you lose something by not having to fight as much. I mean, I never liked getting the leeches when I was sick as a child, but I always knew that once Dr. Michaelman pulled them off my pale, quivering body, that they had rid me of my blood poisons, and all I had to do was fast and pray for 6 days, and then, if the Lord deemed me worthy, I'd start getting better. All that's lost when you just take a pill and wake up feeling stronger than ever. There's value in suffering, if you ask me. There's something to be gained by having to spend your life digging your own grave. But I'm just a broken old man. Who cares what I think? I'm probably just trying to convince myself that I feel that way as a form of self-comfort. Things start looking pretty bleak if you spend too much time recollecting on your life. All the loss, all the struggle. And for what? I'll tell you for what. For a tiny house like this. If I could just get myself a tiny house like this, I'd be happy. It would all be worth it. All of the death and pain and itchiness and heartbreak and rashes that I've endured in my life. It would all be worth it. All be behind me if I could just sneak inside a tiny house like this and claim it as my own. Squatters' rights and all that. Homesteading, whatever it's called. That would really be something. That would really be something special. Hey everybody, today we're going to be showing you how to look at flowers. I look at flowers all the time. It's something I try to do at least several times a week. Don't get me wrong, I don't like most flowers. A lot of them are too big and showy. But some flowers are humble and aren't trying to be the center of attention. Those are the flowers I like. Those are the flowers for me. I like to find flowers that most people would pass by without a second look, and if they did happen to look at them, they would sneer and maybe even spit upon their delicate petals out of spite and hatred. I see myself in those flowers, those forgotten, ignored, hated flowers, those flowers that people cross the street to get away from, those flowers that produce a greasy stink instead of an alluring aroma. Seeing those flowers is like looking into a tiny vegetal mirror. These poor flowers usually don't grow with the popular normal flowers next to well-worn paths and sidewalks and in people's gardens. No, they grow in the more neglected areas where only sick hounds go to splash their hot, putrid urine all over these defenseless flowers. Then the hounds laugh and go tell their hound friends about it, and then more of them come and dump incredible quantities of hound urine fresh from their swollen bladders onto the tiny withered flowers. They laugh some more and work themselves into a frenzy. The hounds are going wild. They're screeching and snapping their powerful, hungry jaws at the flowers, tearing them to shreds, destroying them, devouring them. But it's us flowers who get the last laugh, because now those hounds have got their own pee in their mouths. It serves them right. They deserve to have their own pee in their mouths. Hey everybody, today we're going to be showing you how to explore the city. Sometimes you're in a city that's completely new to you. You've never been here before. You don't know what it's called. You couldn't find it on a map, but you're here, and rather than sitting in the same spot in the direct sun all day, you decide to explore, to see what this new, unfamiliar place has to offer, to see if the people here are just as cruel and brutal as all the others you have met throughout your horrid life. You don't know where to go, but you have no destination in mind, so it doesn't really matter. You just start walking, and before long you come upon a large river. This is a sight you were not expecting to see in such a fully developed urban landscape, and you are pleased at the river's fresh serenity. You stand gazing at the river for some time, not thinking about anything in particular, until a man approaches you and tells you that you must leave. At first you were frightened, but you realize that he's not wearing the attire of any sort of official authority figure or guard. So you ask him in your kindest voice, why is it that he demands that you leave the bank of this beautiful river? He tells you that he's the caretaker of this section of the river, and he's received over 30 complaints in the last 2 hours about some ugly person who's been standing motionless at the edge of the river and has been offending people with their ungodly stink. The caretaker says that he just followed his nose until he found you, and that he has no doubt that you are the smelly culprit. You're shocked and embarrassed to your core, but you put on a stern face and tell the caretaker that you're not going anywhere. You're a new visitor to this town, and you have traveled a long way to get here, and you have just as much right as anybody to enjoy this river. Of course, the caretaker was prepared for your reply, and as you were speaking, he unfurls a lengthy parchment scroll which he claims is an edict, freshly signed by the Queen herself. As soon as you finish speaking, the caretaker clears his throat and proclaims,
Any individual who is found to be stinking of fish, rotten eggs, spoiled milk, or other offensive odors in a public square may be subject to imprisonment, $10,000 fine, or forced washing.
You're taken aback by this new law. You ask him when it went into effect, and the river caretaker says that it was signed only a fortnight ago. You stand there, mouth agape, stupefied for a moment before asking if you'd be able to choose from the 3 applicable punishments if you refused to leave. This catches the caretaker off guard. He frantically reads further down the official scroll but can find no mention of how the punishments are chosen or doled out, so he says that he supposes that you could choose your punishment if you're not willing to leave, but that leaving would certainly be the preferable option in this scenario. A wry smile crosses your wretched face, and you state that you do not plan on leaving the spot where you stand, and that you're willing to accept your punishment. The caretaker's face turns dark and sour. You continue to explain that if you were to be punished for your unpleasant aroma, then you choose the forced washing punishment, and as you are already on the bank of such a great river, you ask that he only lend you a sliver of soap and toss you in. The caretaker is now beyond himself with anger. He grabs you by the back of your trousers and shirt collar, and in one swift motion tosses you body and soul into the river, where you land with a hearty splash. The water is cool and clear, and you open your eyes and see that you're surrounded by dozens of tiny fish. You're not alone in your punishment. You breach the surface and take a deep, refreshing breath. The water feels excellent. You swim a few strokes toward the center of the river before turning back to look at the caretaker, who's frantically washing his soiled hands in the river. He sniffs them and then vomits. You laugh quietly to yourself. You know that getting your stink off of him will be a difficult task if it's it's possible at all. You look up at the pale blue sky, which is dotted with slow-moving clouds. It's beautiful. You float on your back and let the current take you where it pleases. To a new town, perhaps. Maybe out to sea. Maybe you'll end up back where you started. It's impossible to say. Hey everybody, today we're going to be showing you how to listen to music. I used to listen to music a lot, but I don't do it that much anymore. It's just too painful. I don't mean that the music hurts my ears, even though it definitely does when it's too loud. I mean that it's painful in a different way. It's painful in the sense that almost all the music I used to enjoy now reminds me of things that make me feel sad when I listen to it. You see, I used to be a bit happier than I am now. I used to have a life that felt almost normal. I didn't realize how lucky I was at the time. I thought things could just keep going on that way forever, and I'd be able to sit and listen to my favorite albums without weeping or wanting to puke with sadness. What a fool I was. What a fool we all are to think that pain isn't waiting for us around every corner. Everything we do is a roll of the dice. Things may stay the same or they may get much worse, and most of the time we don't even realize that we're gambling with our happiness. That's just what life is, though. Every choice can bring you unimaginable suffering, no matter how insignificant that choice may seem at the time. Years ago, when I still listened to music, I had somebody in my life who I truly love. At the time, I believed that they loved me too. I know better now, though. I know that you can't trust your heart. You can't even trust your brain. I won't go into all the messy details because it's still a bit too painful for me. But let's just say that the person whom I gave my wet little heart to mushed it up and put it on the ground and stepped on it, and then rolled it in the dirt and a little bit of poop and bugs and sharp rocks and laughed in my face the whole time. You know what I mean. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's gone through this. We've all been there, right? Right? Please tell me I'm not alone. At least tell me I'm not the only one who's fallen in love with somebody and gave them my trust and innocence and care and a flower I found next to a bush outside, and then saw them talking to a person I thought was my best friend, and they were giggling and smiling, and they touched their arm, and when they eventually noticed me watching, crying, peeing my pants with sadness, they acted all mad at me and said I was spying on them, but I wasn't even spying. I just happened to be following them and looking at them from a distance without their knowledge. I explained this to them, and they said that's what spying was, and I said no, it isn't. Spying is when you work for the government and go to a different country and try to steal secrets and stuff, and they said it's the same thing, and I said nuh-uh, and they said I was being a stupid baby, and then they married my best friend and invited the whole school except for me. Please tell me that's happened to you too. I can't be the only one. Hey everybody, today we're going to be showing you how to attach a box blade to a tractor. Now before you turn away and discuss because you think this is a topic that doesn't concern you, a topic that can't be of any benefit to you because you either already know how to attach a box blade to your tractor or you use your tractor in ways that do not require the use of a box blade, let me just stop you there and say this. Can't there be value inherent in the act of learning? Isn't it nice to learn something just to learn it, regardless of its direct impact on your daily activities and chores? What's wrong with learning for learning's sake? Nothing. Nothing's wrong with it. I've spent my entire life in the pursuit of knowledge, and let me tell you, almost everything I've ever learned has not been useful to me in a practical manner. I can't tell you how many nights I've stayed awake until the wee hours of the morning studying up on some technique or history that had no value to me other than its value of new knowledge. I don't regret a single moment I've spent learning about Roman aquacultural techniques, or the proper method for repairing a pair of leather gloves, or how much the sun weighs. I love knowing stuff, and I love learning stuff, and you would too if you knew it was good for you. But alas, you kids these days don't see the value in learning unless you think it'll benefit you immediately and immensely. I don't mean to sound like the old man that I am, but things were different when I was your age. Children didn't spend all their free time touching telephones. In fact, we didn't even have a telephone in our home until just after I moved out to live on my own. I never even used the phone that was in my parents' house. I had no need to. I could just go over there and speak to them in person. Speaking to people face to face, that's what it's all about. You lose so much when communication is in writing, or even when you're yelling through a wall or some other physical barrier which blocks the recipient of your words from view. Maybe they're down a well or in a gulch or something, I don't know. So much of communication comes down to how somebody's face looks, the way their wet little lips glisten and shine, the way their acne scars and ingrown hairs bulge and shimmer in the noonday sun, the way the white foam collects in the corners of their mouth, and you try not to keep looking at it, but you do because it's weird and gross. Why does that white foamy spit collect there? Why does that only happen to some people? It can't just be because they're thirsty or something. This guy just took a big ol' sip of water right before he started talking, then dribbled right down his chinny chin. It got on his shirt. You try not to look at the dark spot on his shirt either. You do everything you can to avoid letting him notice that you see the spit in the corners of his mouth and the dark water spot upon his breast. Then you think to yourself, maybe I should just tell him that he's got a case of the old spit corners, a case of spitty mouth. It's not that embarrassing, right? It happens to people all the time. Well, I guess it doesn't happen to people all the time. You can't remember the last time you had a conversation with somebody who had the weird bits of spit in the corners of their mouth, and it's sort of dried, so the spit is adhered to the top and bottom of each mouth corner, so when they open their mouth, the white foam separates, and when they close their mouth, it rejoins. A rack of foam washed up on some defiled, ruinous beach, visited by no being other than death, who stalks the water's edge, waiting, thirsty to take any life unlucky enough to land on this horrid stretch of powdered glass and pulverized bone. Anyway, maybe you should say something to him about the spit in the corners of his mouth. Sure, you don't know him that well, but there's the old rule regarding social etiquette and letting people know that something about their appearance is off. There's probably some fancy rhyme or saying to it or something, but it boils down to this. You should only tell somebody that something about their appearance is off if it would take them less than 30 seconds to fix it right then and there. I mean, you don't want to tell somebody that their new haircut makes them look like a guy you saw on the news the other night who got arrested for stealing frogs and then painting them weird colors and trying to sell them to a museum, but the museum people were smart enough to know that they weren't some rare special frogs or anything. They were just normal slime toads that this dope had painted silver to make them look like they were endangered or something, so he got thrown in frog jail, and his mugshot is a real laugh because his hair looks so stupid. You don't want to tell somebody that their haircut makes them look like the frog thief, because they can't do anything about their haircut if they're out and about with you, but if they've got something in their teeth or they misbuttoned their shirt, it's alright to let them know, kindly and gently, of course, because they're able to remedy those issues right away without much trouble. So yeah, you've decided to tell this guy that he's got a serious buildup of white spittle in each corner of his mouth, but right as you're about to let him know, you realize you haven't been paying attention to anything he's been saying for the last few minutes because you've been too busy thinking about proper etiquette and the guy who stole those frogs and got caught and is in prison for 60 years. Sure, 60 years seems like a long time for a frog-related crime, but it wasn't the frogs that brought such a hefty sentence. It was the museum aspect. Apparently, it's extremely illegal to lie to a museum. It doesn't matter what it's regarding. If you lie to somebody, anybody, while you're in a museum, I'm pretty sure you can be arrested. I don't really know why. I think it has to do with the separation of church and state or something. That's why I avoid museums. Anyway, you haven't been paying attention to old Spit Boy for at least the last 3 minutes, and now he's asking you what you think about what he just said. You're freaking out. You don't know what he just said, and even if you did, you hate being put on the spot like that, so you just stare at him for a second before saying, you've got something in your teeth. You don't know why you said that. His teeth are fine. They're really in great shape. It's his mouth that's the source of everybody's problems. He starts digging between his chompers with his long brown thumbnail, and you think you're lucky stars that you've just bought yourself some time. He's digging away, really getting deep in there, really deep. His gums are starting to bleed in a few spots. He looks at you and shows you his teeth, and he can tell from your worried expression that something's wrong, and he asks, "Did I get it?" He pulls his thumb from between his front teeth to see if he's been able to retrieve a piece of lettuce or maybe a seed from his pearly whites, but let's be honest, this guy doesn't eat lettuce. He hates the stuff. He won't touch a vegetable without a gun to his head, and he's proud to bring up that fact any chance he gets. In fact, he's wearing a shirt that says as much. You look down at a shirt that reads, "I wouldn't touch a vegetable unless there was a gun to my head," and it has a picture of Bugs Bunny eating a carrot with Elmer Fudd pressing the barrel of a shotgun to his ears. Did you ever stop to think about how truly horrific and violent those old Bugs Bunny cartoons are? I say old Bugs Bunny cartoons as if there were new ones. Maybe there are new ones, I don't know. The ones I'm familiar with were old even when I was a child. I guess they're ancient now. I doubt you kids even have any idea of what I'm referring to. You probably think Bugs Bunny is some dead old aristocrat who lived in Boston in the late 1800s and worked at a factory making poisons. Sure, he was the owner of the factory, so his life wasn't like that of some character in a Dickens novel, but it was still the 1800s, so stuff was way harder than it is now. They didn't even have running water or toilets or cars back then, I don't think. I assume I'm right, and you will too if you know what's good for you. Bugs' real first name was Arthur, but everybody called him Bugs because it was ironic. Get it? Do you get it? He was the owner of a factory that made poisons, specifically bug poisons, so people called him Bugs. It's like calling a gigantic man Tiny or calling me Einstein. You get it. Arthur Bunny began life in a middle-class home under the strict upbringing of his father, Simmons Bunny, and his mother's father, Granule Bunny. His mother died in childbirth, and his father never let him forget that if it weren't for his being born, he'd still be happily married to a woman who was once referred to as the third handsomest woman in all of Dukes County. Arthur led a rather unremarkable life until his 22nd birthday. It was on this day that his great-uncle died and left him the keys to a profitable little poison manufacturing plant in Boston. Arthur, having few friends and even fewer interests in his hometown, jumped at the opportunity to run a factory and poison thousands, if not millions, of insects. He packed his bags and arrived at the factory in bustling downtown Boston within a fortnight. He found the work of managing wretched men and filthy street urchins quite enjoyable. He was stern but fair with his workers, and they much preferred his rule to that of the former owner, Arthur's great-uncle. Under his stewardship, the factory produced more poison than ever before. They even started producing a wider range of poisons. Sure, the bug-killing business was good. There was never a shortage of bugs in Boston, but the raw materials needed to concoct these simple killing formulas were cheap, and he couldn't justify selling his product at much of a markup. As such, he spearheaded a program of formulating poisons for much larger creatures: horses, elk, carnivorous birds, alligators, you get the idea. The new poisons sold like hotcakes, which had recently been invented and were selling quite well. Arthur was doing just fine. He was now primarily going by Bugs, even though the insect poisons were making up a smaller and smaller portion of the annual sales with each passing year, but the nickname was given to him affectionately by the factory staff, and it held a special place in his heart. He was now 28 years old, and he'd built the poison factory into something much grander than it had been when he had inherited it those few years ago. Bugs Bunny was a happy man. He was happy, but not satisfied. For the past 6 years, he'd focused on nothing but his business. He had amassed a sizable fortune. He wore fine clothes and lived in a large home which was built to his specifications, but it was empty. Not in a literal sense. He had a staff of 13 men and women who cooked and cleaned and did all sorts of domestic work at his manor, but when he arrived home after a long day of making liquids and powders which would be used to stop other creatures from being alive, he often found himself feeling utterly and completely alone. His days were filled with such hustle and bustle, always signing papers, always dictating letters, always rushing across the factory floor. Whenever he was home, where things moved at a much slower, quieter pace, he would fall into deep bouts of sorrow that grew and grew over the years until they were so debilitating that Bugs ended up selling the factory before he was 50 years old. He just couldn't cope with the loneliness, the silence. He couldn't stand it, but he couldn't bring himself to do anything to change it. He wouldn't go out, and he would have no visitors. He fired his servants. He lived in complete isolation for a time and is now buried in the old cemetery on Chappaquiddick Island next to his father and mother's plots. And I'm sure you're wondering how he died, so I'll tell you. Bugs Bunny killed himself by eating 2 bags of horse poison. Okay, are you happy now? Is that what you wanted to hear? Is your morbid curiosity satisfied for once? For once in your life? Hey everybody, today we're going to be showing you how to make cheese. Cheese is a food that's made out of bad milk. I know that sounds bad, but it tastes pretty good sometimes and is really easy to make. To make cheese, all you have to do is take some wet milk and cook it and stir it and squeeze it. I don't really understand how it works, but if you do it right, you'll end up with a big old tub of cheese that you can eat all night long. Invite your friends over and have a cheese sleepover where you eat bucketfuls of cheese and talk about mean teachers and boys. It'll be great. Please invite me. I've never been to a sleepover. I never get invited to anything. Please, I want to know what it's like to have fun.